So you're here because you're wondering what has changed with Sage in Dawntrail. Well, Sage pretty much did not change at all and has only gotten slight upgrades, like all the other healers, to its core kit that will help it stand out from the rest. Actually, out of all the other healers, Sage probably got the least meaningful changes moving into Dawntrail, which doesn't really surprise me as its foundation was pretty strong already. However, with changes like Soteria's cooldown being reduced to 60 seconds and Physis II now having an extra 5 seconds on its healing increase effect, you might be thinking, is that it? But don't worry, this feeling won't last too long, as the 2 new actions Sage gains almost makes you forget about those rather mediocre changes. Sage's identity as having more healing throughput than Scholar is now even more pronounced with the addition of Philosophia. This means in encounters favoring high healing output over mitigation, Sage will have the upper hand. Sage's Addergall system is also a lossless healing system, ensuring continuous healing through Ixochol, Caracol, Turocol, or Duocol, even if it leads to some overhealing. While its counterpart Scholar will be turning any excess form of healing into damage through energy drain. This can lead it to feeling more comfortable to heal on, as the surplus healing from Sage gives you a wider safety net. Sage is also extremely strong at micromanagement of the party, with the ability to place Haima and Cardia on any player of your choosing, making it an incredibly powerful tool when used correctly. This capability is even more enhanced in Dawntrail, with Soteria's cooldown being reduced to 60 seconds, providing 4 procs of a 289 potency heal on a target of your choice more frequently. This can especially be useful for tank upkeep during long sweeps of auto attacks, or when there is outgoing damage at different intervals, causing one player to take more damage than another. Think of mechanics like the dolls in the Epic of Alexander, or the tether DPS right before Harrowing Hell in P10, where you can place Cardia on one player and Haima on the other. Looking at the 2 extremes that we have now is actually a pretty good example of how Sage will perform versus Scholar in what's to come. Playing Sage in the first extreme feels really good. Its movement and mobility helps it get into position faster, while also having the persistent dot on players, combined with light but persistent outgoing damage, means this is practically Sage's playground. But when we look at the second extreme that's more centered around heavier hits with less outgoing damage in between, Sage's potential falls off a steep cliff due to it needing to input more of its abilities to reach the same mitigation potential as Scholar. This will bring us to our next topic, which is double shield compositions. Why debate which shield healer to exclude when you can bring both? Double shield compositions were extremely strong in Endwalker and has only gotten stronger in Dawntrail due to the changes emphasizing each job's strengths. Scholar has gained more mitigation capacity and the ability to become a pure healer every 3 minutes through Seraphism, while Sage has enhanced pure healing and micromanagement capabilities through Philosophia and Soteria's recast reduction. With Scholar able to mitigate damage to extreme levels every 60 seconds through Recitation, Sage can fill in any damage gaps with Zoe. This means if there's a theoretical raid wide every 30 seconds, Scholar and Sage can alternate their big GC shields while covering any other gaps with their off-global mitigation, and for healing checks that require extensive planning, like those in Dragonsong's Reprise, alternating between both jobs' 3-minute cooldowns can handle them with ease. While double shield comps are going to be very strong under the right circumstances, I will put a disclaimer that the weaknesses prior still exist. There's still the issue of having a bad mana economy split between the 2 while also having a lower ceiling of recovery potential. This is coupled with requiring the ability to have very good communication with your co-healer so cooldowns aren't overlapped or wasted. Meaning unless you know exactly what you are doing and have extensively planned and practiced to bring 2 shield healers to a raid more so in early progression, I wouldn't recommend it. Furthermore, it doesn't help that Astrologians acquired more mitigation through its level 100 action, along with the ability to stack shields through neutral sect, and depending on the encounter design, this can be more beneficial than more frequent mitigation. In this video, I'll be giving my first impressions of the Sage job in Dawntrail through my experience leveling it and playing it in the new Extreme Trials. While we talked quite a bit about Sage already, let's take a look at their 2 new actions. Psyche. I don't really have too much to say about this ability. I like the fact that this is a 60-second cooldown instead of a 2-minute one like all the other healer DPS actions, and that it's not tied to a specific ability, but otherwise it's just an extra off GCD press you're doing during your burst cycles. I find it amusing that the animation to damage registration takes about 2.1 seconds, but since it's an off GCD, this shouldn't matter too much. However, there could be situations in the future where timing it is critical, similar to E3's Leviathan, where some jobs would use their first big off GCD right out of the downtime to get an extra skill use right before the second Maelstrom. Philosophia is extremely strong, but only under the right circumstances. When I first learned about this ability, I actually really disliked it, and honestly, I still kind of do, though just not as much as before. For a 3-minute cooldown, it feels very underwhelming and restrictive. When compared to the other 3-minute abilities like Seraphism, Lilybell, and Macrocosmos, which can dramatically change the way you handle mechanics, Philosophia just doesn't have the same impact. This is largely due to the fact that the ability takes 8 to 9 GCDs to gain the maximum effect and is practically uncontrollable due to it being tied to the GCD, unlike the aforementioned skills. Lilybell only procs on effective damage, Macrocosmos stores effective damage and you can activate it again at any other time, and Seraphism is tied to only your healing GCDs, which by nature are usually timed well. These other abilities provide more flexibility and control, whereas Philosophia does not. When it comes to Philosophia, your ability to fully utilize its effect depends entirely on how your GCD is rolling. There is a possibility that the heal effect will result in overhealing unless you deliberately hold your GCD to align with incoming damage, which results in not only a damage loss for yourself, but a loss for proc effectiveness, as well as for each GCD you lose under eudaimonia, the less procs you will get in total. This can actually be seen during the first extreme trial, where if we were to use Philosophia as the feathers are coming down during the lightning sky rune and you're just rolling your GCD, you're gambling on the heal effect actually healing worthwhile damage. Similarly, if we were to use Philosophia on something like a raid-wide bleed, we might have the same issue, as unless you are carefully planning your pre-pull timer, the bleed damage and the rate at which your GCD registers are unmanageable. And if your GCD hits right before a player takes damage, that proc is now fully wasted. Not only this, but because damage in this game propagates onto players slightly differently, there's also a chance one or two players don't fully utilize the proc, but others do. This leads to the skill as a controlled healing tool to feel pretty cumbrous. Now, when speaking about the utilization of this skill, I think it's pretty important to keep in mind the total potency ceiling of the skill itself. And generally, unless you plan on hitting an instant cast at the end of the duration to snapshot an extra GCD, we're looking at a total of 1440 potency over 8 GCDs and 1620 potency over 9. Take this number and compare it to the total HP potency of a non-tank player, which is around 2500, which means at max value it heals for around 60% of a player's HP pool. And the fact that outside of optimization environments, it's going to be extremely hard to even get close to the full value of the skill, and it leaves it feeling pretty mediocre for a 3-minute cooldown. It's also worth noting that Seraphism provides a 700 potency regen over 20 seconds, half the effect of Philosophia, while significantly boosting healing throughput through its GCDs. This comparison can highlight how underwhelming Philosophia can feel despite its intended strengths. While Philosophia does have its issues, as mentioned earlier, these problems are almost non-existent in environments where you can communicate with your team and create a healing plan to minimize the overhealing. It's also an extremely powerful tool for optimizing your damage, unlike its counterpart, Seraphism, which requires healing GCDs for maximum effectiveness. Overall, it's a very good skill in the right environments, but might be found a bit lackluster in somewhere like Duty Finder. With the two new actions out of the way, let's talk about Soteria and the Physis II upgrades. Actually, more specifically, the Physis II upgrade, as the Soteria upgrade is decent enough when conditions are met, as it can be a nifty tool to use for managing the party's HP. It almost feels like a slap in the face when our sole level up reward for level 98 is just a 5-second increase to auto Physis. Something that probably should have been there from the start, but could have easily been coupled with a more meaningful change like decreasing Rizomata to 60 seconds or even letting it generate a stack of Addersting, letting the job flow so much better in encounters where we don't want the GCD heal. Even giving something like Icarus an extra charge would have been way more beneficial while increasing the fun and mobility of the job. The extra 5 seconds to auto Physis is mostly going to be a quality of life change rather than a buff, as experienced Sage players can usually fully utilize what they wanted to in those 10 seconds previously. I'm also somewhat disappointed that Panhaima and Haima did not receive the same treatment as Lilybell, allowing players to manually trigger the healing aspect of the abilities. This would have made Sage's healing toolkit more engaging by giving us the option to switch from that mitigation aspect to the healing one before the timer expired. However, I understand why Square Enix might be cautious about this change, as new players could misuse it, opting for early healing when in most cases careful planning is necessary to maximize the healing potential. Overall, Sage is a very powerful barrier healer, excelling in pure healing rather than just barriers. The addition of Philosophia combined with Panhaima enables players to manage multi-hit AoE attacks effortlessly. And the straightforward nature of the job will still appeal to the players who prefer a simpler approach compared to the more complex mechanics of the Scholar. Moving into Dawntrail, Sage's toolkit has evolved, subtly distinguishing it as its own unique healer rather than just merely a secondary Scholar. Ideally, moving forward, the dichotomy between Sage and Scholar damage-wise remains somewhat the same as it is now, where Sage gains an edge in competition where Scholar has yet to optimize an encounter, dealing excess Ruin 2s and Aetherflow healing, and Scholar gains the edge once players begin to optimize. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video where we will be going over the final healer yet to cover, White Mage.